Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speak, Film, and Enter, a podcast where we review and rank movies. I'm Nate.
And I'm Dylan.
And I'm Adam.
And today it is Movie Club number 10.
Mm-hmm.
New segment this year. We've made it all the way to 10 episodes of it at least, so not a total failure.
It's a thing now.
We've made it this far. So for those of you who have been around and seen some of our other Movie Club episodes, what we like to do is just pick any older movie basically that we find interesting, and the three of us watch it, we discuss it, we release them on Fridays. It had been every Friday for a while, but little break there around the Oscars. We're back with our 10th selection.
Mm-hmm.
And the way we chose this 10th one was that we all made predictions for the Oscars, and the winner got to choose the next Movie Club movie. The winner was me, with nobody did well, really. It was just kind of the least bad.
I think it was like 12 to 11 to 9, correct?
Something. That's what I mean. Like it was
okay.
Like I think I was like barely over 50%, and it was none of them were really to write home about.
I mean, I'm glad we subverted our own expectations, but you know.
Yeah. So I chose the 1968 movie musical Oliver for two reasons, really. One is that I love it, but the biggest reason is that you guys aren't really musical people. And this felt like kind of the only opportunity for me to just sort of force this upon you.
Yeah. And I hadn't seen it. I don't think Dylan had seen it either. So I think that's I think that's a good choice, is find a movie that neither of the other two had seen. Because, if and when we get to choose our own, if we do another contest of sorts, I'm going to try to do something similar.
Yeah. And I definitely, if we had been doing some sort of list, or if this would have come up some other way and you would have tried to make us watch Oliver, I probably would have fought tooth and nail against it and been like, no, let's not do favorite musicals then. This was pretty much your only chance. You had the trump card, you laid it down, and well played, sir.
Yeah, I took it. And so the three of us all watched this together, which we don't often do. Kind of, we're all busy. We kind of watch this by ourselves. But this time, we all gathered, we got some food and a musical on a Tuesday, and it was just grand. Before we get any further along, though, Adam, would you like to tell the people what Oliver the Musical is about?
I will. After being sold to a mortician, young orphan Oliver Twist runs away and meets a group of boys trained to be pickpockets by an elderly mentor in 1830s London.
And based on the popular Charles Dickens novel, Oliver Twist. So a lot of people are probably familiar with this story. A lot of people our age probably saw Oliver and Company as kids, the Disney musical from 88. This one, much bigger, live action, 2.5 hours long. It brings the full flavor of what you're expecting in a movie musical. And so, again, if you're not familiar with these episodes that we've done, we like to kind of do a no spoiler section at the beginning, but generally make it kind of quick, especially for the movies that are significantly older that we feel like there's not a ton to spoil, really. But we'll do a quick short review, general thoughts, give our scores just like normal at the end of that, and then we'll dive into spoiler section in the second half. So I guess I kind of said why I chose it, and already said at the beginning, I love this movie. It's toward the back half of my 100 favorite movies of all time. It's one I grew up with a lot. I think the soundtrack, with the exception of one or two songs, is phenomenal. And the set designs are incredible. And one of my favorite performances ever in any movie I've ever seen, from Ron Moody as Fagin, the adult leader of this band of child pickpockets.
Rapscallions.
Yes, just all of those things together combine to make this one of my favorite movies. So I was glad you guys humored me and watched it with me. But I also thought there was a good chance that you would like it, because I do actually think it's really, really good. I wasn't just trying to pick any movie musical just to make you watch it. But with that in mind, took the opportunity, had you guys watch it. What did you think?
I'll go first. Well, I think for me, I enjoyed it. Definitely better than the average musical, in my opinion. I had a good time. I think for me, it really rests on the characters. This movie being 2.5 hours long, it never really felt that long because I mean the pace in general is good and the songs are good and the sets, like you mentioned, are grand and detailed and really delightful to look at. A lot of wide shots where there's 100 people on screen doing different things, and then they all kind of choreographed, and that stuff looks really cool. But the real strength of this movie for me is the characters. So I didn't feel the runtime because when like the characters were on screen, they were just so well executed and fleshed out and kind of imagined that it was entertaining. Mostly Fagin, like you mentioned, played by Ron Moody, just incredible. Like from the moment he's introduced throughout the movie, but also Nancy, played by Shani Wallace. I thought she was really good. Dodger, played by Jack Wilde, he was like perfectly cast. His look, his little facial expressions, like Dodger was great. And even like the magistrate was like well cast. I just think like there were certain characters, mostly Fagin, Nancy, and Dodger. Bill was pretty good, but he didn't have to sing any songs. He was kind of one note. But that really just like carried it for me, and were just really well executed. And like since in the day since we watched it, more memorable is what I think back to is the characters.
Yeah, that's what I'll come back to as well, as characters and the development of them throughout the movie. I also like my first thought when we were done was like, man, they just don't make them like they used to. The effort that is put into like the choreography and the set design and build and how many of them there are, and all like obviously this is a musical, so it's like rife with songs and there's not really that much dialogue. It's all through the music and all through the lyrics. I don't know that we could pull off something of this magnitude. Granted, I haven't seen La La Land, and that's I would assume very similar as far as musicals goes and the scale. But just how much effort and what we could do at the time, the technology that was there. Most of this movie would be green screen now, or just like a fake background. And the effort that's put into the set design and that stuff makes this feel more lived in, makes this feel more real, puts you more into each situation. I think of the first time you see the kind of I would say not the ghetto, but the rundown area they live in. That is all just gross, and like you can see the grimy water, and you could basically smell how terrible that place is. Versus the bright shiny area when he gets pseudo adopted right away, and he wakes up and he's on the balcony and they're all singing and saying, "Here's my wares, who will buy my stuff?" Like just the difference in all of that is so striking and so much fun. Memorable moments. We were, kind of talking throughout the movie as it was going, just kind of poking at it or making fun of this or making fun of that. The fiddler guy in the flute guy in the tree that makes no sense. Joking about the kids right away with all their food and the gruel. It was just there's so many things that just make this very, very fun and very interesting. I mean, and
classic opening.
Yeah, it's just what else can you say? I really enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, Adam, I saw we'll get to the scores obviously in a bit, but I saw you posted it on Letterboxd this morning, and that just kind of like Dylan when I upped my score for Nope. Just for something like this that I watched this a million times as a kid, and I know musicals aren't your guys' thing, so it's sort of like I had a wide range of expectations for how you guys could respond to this movie, and to hear that to see that you both really liked it was just very enjoyable for me.
So validating.
Yeah, because I really felt like we sat down and I was like, it's 2.5 hours long. And I really like musicals, but I also think that there is nothing worse than a bad musical. If you're not feeling a musical, like it's just so in your face. You can't escape it. It seems like it never stops and they're always long.
Every song is 10 minutes.
So I was just really dreading getting like halfway through this and having both of you guys just be like, "Ugh, I don't know."
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. And part of that is I do think there's a section in the first act of this movie that is incredibly unnecessary and not really very good. And that's pretty much everything with The Undertaker. And the song that he sings in there, like when I rewatched this movie, I just completely skipped that. at this point.
Mhm.
After he sings "Boy for Sale," which, yes, Dylan made a very funny point on how, like, just if you saw a guy doing that, and you can say that with every musical,
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
imagine if somebody was singing. But that one really struck me as something that you maybe could possibly see or have seen at some point in real
Yeah.
life because it's just one guy in it,
Yeah.
right? I kind of go through that and then I just pick it up once they get to London. It's really only skipping like 10 minutes of the movie,
Mhm.
but I do not like those 10 minutes really. But after that, I think when they get to London, when he pokes his head out of the cart of lettuce and you got a lot
Arise
more
from the light.
colors and he meets the Artful Dodger and they
Mhm.
sing Consider Yourself, that through Be Back Soon. There are 5 songs in there.
Mhm.
And that stretch is like one of my favorite stretches in any movie ever made. I like 5 songs that are probably in my 20, 25 favorite musical songs ever. And it's all just fantastic. And so when we got to that part and you guys were actually like enjoying it, it was fun because, like I said, musicals are kind of a niche taste outside of the Disney subgenre.
Mhm.
So it was fun to see that you both liked it. And yeah, I mean, any particular favorite songs that stood out to you?
I mean, Consider Yourself is great. It's a good introduction to Oliver and Artful Dodger and like where we're actually going to go, like where the meat of
Yeah.
the story is about to be. I really like that. And then the song that Nancy sings, I think we talked about it when we watched it. Yeah, that's the emotional pull here. That's like what really drives home what Dylan was talking about earlier, the character development in this movie. That's something that I want to watch again, or at least we'll like
Yeah.
find a YouTube video of that and go
Yeah.
through that again. But those two probably.
Yeah, probably that one, and then my favorite was probably the Pickpocket song.
Yeah.
Because it was very catchy, and the performance of it with the Pickpocket kids and particularly Fagin just stealing the show. And I mean, that was I don't know, maybe just because it was so close, kind of like in where you're just like in kind of this attic where they've kind of all been living. A lot of the other numbers and stuff are so grand and so kind of big and wide, and that one just feels like they're all just like in their living room, like just like getting after it. And when he comes in with the umbrella, like it's just on another level. So yeah, probably that.
All right. Do we have anything else, or do we want to dive into the stars and then jump into
Yeah.
the spoiler section?
Let's do that.
All right. We'll be right back with our star ratings.
And we're
All
back.
right. We are back. I will go first.
Okay.
I have this as a 4.5 star movie. The parts that I watch on rewatch now is basically a 5, but I do have to account for the fact that there's like a 10-minute section of this movie that I just skip every time
Mm-hmm.
because I just don't find it interesting. Like really, and it has nothing to do with the story either. Like he could escape the workhouse
Yeah.
and go straight to London, and it would be basically the same thing. So I love this to death, despite a little stupid section in there. Yeah, one of my favorites. So 4.5 stars for me.
All right.
Nice.
I'll go next. I'm going to go just a little lower. I'm going to give it a 4, but coming into this, like we mentioned, I'm not a huge musical guy, so a 4 is I mean, that's really, I thought this was great. I thought this was a great time. If you're someone who isn't really into musicals but you're thinking of giving this one a shot, I mean, remember that it did win the Academy Award in its day for Best Picture. So I mean, it's worth checking out just for that alone. Like people were clearly blown away at the time, and it's worth seeing. And I'm glad that I saw it, and it's really good. And for nothing else, you need to see it for Fagin and just the character performances. It's just there's certain things that you can't even talk, like the little footwork he does on the stairs at one point and then ends up sliding down the stairs, like all these little flares that are just so perfectly done.
He looks like he weighs like 12 pounds the way that he moves around.
Yeah, but he's also like a kind of tall, wiry guy. Like he's kind of like, yeah, really cool. So I'm gonna give it a solid 4 out of 5.
Nice. I'm gonna go be right in line with Nate. I'm gonna give this a 4 now. Oops, I'm gonna give this a 4.5. I didn't mean to click that. The music is fantastic. The acting is great. Every character is memorable in their own way. A lot of the symbolism that goes around this movie is relevant through today, which makes it timeless, makes it classic. I'm not a huge Dickens fan, as I read Great Expectations in high school and hated it. And it's just garbage, but this is really good. Obviously, the parts of this that have remained through the years. Please, Sir, I Want Some More. Those types of things have been around, and I've seen those things and just never quite gotten to this. I'm glad we sat down for it. Again, the scale of every song, besides even, I suppose, even the one in the attic, the pickpocket song, when they create their own little car, like with all the boys and the
I'd Do Anything.
Yeah. Like some of that stuff is just so great. Every character is memorable, and it's shocking towards the end. There's just things that I didn't think they would do, or that I thought were more of an adult thing if this was supposed to be more of a kids type of thing. It's wonderful in all aspects, and I agree that there's the weak point of the Undertaker and that stuff. Obviously, it serves its own purpose, but as you said, you can remove it without too much issue. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome, just warms my heart. So this would normally be the time when we would announce next week's movie club pick, but I don't think we're going to be doing one next week. I'll be doing some traveling for work. So we haven't decided on that yet. We will have an update on that before we have the next one to give people time to watch that if they want to. But with that out of the way, I guess we can dive into the spoiler discussion for this movie from 1968 that I did look up. This was nominated for 11 Oscars.
Damn.
Won 4.
Dang. So it's almost as good as Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yes, 5. I think it was given a
well, in that case, it's 6 because as I look on IMDb, it won for best music score of a musical picture, original or adaptation, best sound, best art direction, set decoration, best director, and best picture, and then the honorary award of outstanding choreography achievement for Oliver went to Anna White. So that's 6.
You're right. So it did win 6.
Damn. Including
Best Picture over 2001: A Space Odyssey, which has made this movie kind of hated in history in some circles and polarizing in some ways, and others just kind of
similar to Shakespeare in Love.
Yeah, that's one of them too, where Shakespeare in Love winning over Saving Private Ryan, right? Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of 2001: A Space Odyssey, so this doesn't bother me at all. But I think really what we saw was, first off, Adam mentioned it last night, just a huge science fiction epic that people didn't really quite know what to do with.
Yeah.
And also sort of a throwback to these grand musicals from director Carol Reed, who I think was aging at this point and was kind of one of the big giants in like the 40s and 50s, and this is the late 60s. So I think the combination of those things, but I also do think it's great, and I think it's worthy. And yeah, to Adam, to your point, to kind of get into the end where Nancy just dies and
she's murdered.
Yeah, she's murdered by Bill Sikes. And yeah, it's interesting how this movie does kind of, a lot of the main characters are kids. Oliver's a kid. There's an innocence to it, but I like how a lot of the music hints at darker things ahead, where like the Pickpocket song, even mentioned Bill Sikes in there and how all the kids idolize him. And in I'd Do Anything, that's a fun song where like Oliver and Dodger are singing along with Nancy, and they're just kind of having a pretend fantasized view of maybe having money and being and living on the nicer side of town.
Yep.
Doing fancy people things. And then Fagin comes out with these sort of demands of turning it with like, would you risk death for me?
Yeah.
And they just willingly, like, very, like, the melody of the song does not change. And I think that's effective to show, like, it's fucked up.
Yeah.
But you're kind of still singing along, and it's interesting the way that they do that. And
the song Nancy sings about like this kind of life or whatever too is very much the same way. It's like surface level, it's very optimistic, but if you read into it and kind of see like what they're showing you on screen, like it's very much like we're just
it's a
trying
fine
to
life.
yeah, it's a fine life. We're just trying to get by. Like we're
Yeah,
like
like
we're
I can't
mostly
do that
miserable.
much
We
better.
need this to like get away from like how And
Well,
that's
there's
the
also a
feeling you get.
line in that song about like abusive relationships. And
Mhm.
like if he blacks one eye, just cover that one and hope he doesn't black the other one.
Yeah.
And like that's just, and they sing that all smiling and happy. And I can see issues with maybe, I can see that looking like kind of a bad depiction.
Mhm.
But I think with the continued focus on Nancy's character and her kind of big song in the second half and her scene with the magistrate, or not the
Yep.
magistrate, but the wealthier guy, kind of explaining and looking at how these abusive relationships can continue and how like down the rabbit hole people can get to like justify staying in them or being too afraid to get out of them,
Mhm.
which are often tangled together. And it leads, and we get these hints of Bill's violence throughout the entire thing, and that like slowly starts to bubble up and come to the surface,
Mhm.
where we just get these kids like praying to be like Bill Sykes when they're older.
Yeah.
And then we see what that becomes and kind of what the future might hold for Dodger in particular, potentially,
Mhm.
which is scary because he's probably, I mean, maybe the most fun character in the entire movie, especially
Yeah.
when you watch it as a kid. Like he is just so cool.
He's
Mhm.
And
charming.
you watch this when you're like 8 years old.
hmm
And so, yeah, a lot of adult themes here that are sort of hidden in the lyrics underneath like a kind of happier melody and a more up tempo, something you can sing along to.
Mhm.
And then it just slowly starts to work its way to the surface until it all just sort of erupts in rage and
Mhm.
violence at the end to a point where it is shocking, especially if you're kind of just first time you go through it, you don't know the story and you're set up with this story about these kids.
You think it's Newsies, and you're like, okay, things are gonna work out.
This
Right.
will be okay.
The rich guy's gonna adopt all of them.
Yeah. Then you remember
Yeah.
it's 1830s Industrial Revolution England, and you're like, we're fucked. Like,
Yeah, but I really like the way that the movie, for the most part, I think pulls that off.
Yeah, and even like the very end for Dodger and Fagin, like the
Yeah.
leads points to like the cyclical nature of it. Like even after all this, like they're just gonna keep doing what they're doing. I kind of interpreted it as almost a very like it's like everyone, all the characters we meet, everyone's just trying to get out of that world.
Mhm.
They're trying to move up, and it's a study of how different characters try to do that in their own ways, and what that kind of pressure and need to not just survive, but actually have a life that you enjoy and is worth living, and like what people are willing to do to get that. And I just feel like that kind of points to at the beginning when we meet all the kids, it's all dark and gray and they have the gruel, but there's a peek into where the magistrates and the officials are eating dinner, and it's a lovely feast that looks incredible, and all the kids are singing about food, and it's almost like that was just a little glimpse into the world that then like everyone we meet is trying to get into, just the way that Oliver and the kids were trying to get into, just for a taste of that life. So I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah.
It was very. I think, and for the Kubrick thing, I do really like 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I think these two would be a fascinating double feature because honestly, like I think Kubrick's up in space doing all these big ideas, and Oliver's like, here's what's going on in the street though. It's people
Yeah.
trying to find love and survive.
Yeah.
Very human story. I think it'd be wonderful. But yeah, but yeah, I think the ending just works. I mean, how it all ends up ties in, perfectly. It's tragic that I wish Nancy would have lived, because it is tragic, and especially because she really at the end has these great emotional scenes. Adam, you mentioned that most of it's a lot of singing and not a ton of dialogue, but I think the scenes that aren't singing are very well executed.
absolutely.
Like especially at the end, the dramatic scenes when stuff's really coming to a head, and there's like they got to nail like the shot, the line delivery, like to really make it feel that those were all really well done. I liked the non-musical stuff a lot. So
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty much complete, well crafted, well put together movie.
Well, and like we've said, like all the characters are unique and memorable in their own way. I do love that Bill is this imposing guy who never gets to sing. He's just this big, imposing, like masculine. I don't do shit like that, and like I'm the brute kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have Nancy and they're together, like she obviously understands that this is his nature. She loves him anyway, and it's her downfall.
And she realizes a way out of this life.
Yeah, to a certain degree. I think that's when she turns and realizes that like she can love something else, and that's why she sacrifices so much for Oliver to get him out. She sees, potential, or the fact that he has a way out, and she's basically granting her life so that somebody else can have that. And that's usually the sign of like what we consider a good person.
And the humanity of it, like, to go against everyone's just trying to get out of there, but there is a line for her. And it's like, no, I'm not just going to let you like possibly kill this kid or whatever you're going to do. Like there is a line. And when that line is reached, she does go against Bill. And that's dramatic and well done.
Yeah, I really like that too, because they do draw a line between Bill and Fagin at one point.
Fagin too.
But then as the story goes along, they draw a line between Fagin and Nancy as well. Because when Bill starts to get a little more violent, like Fagin tells him not to, but Nancy's the one who actually like physically tries to stop him and physically gets in his way and is the one to like actually grab Oliver. Where I think like Fagin, were it up to him, I think he lines up with Nancy pretty well on what should be done, but he's not willing to risk what Nancy is.
Yeah. When the chips are down, Fagin will cower or will acquiesce to the power or the pure physical force that is above him.
Whether that's Bill and the power dynamic, the power dynamic that we see flip from the beginning, where he kind of has influence and power over Bill, and by the end, Bill is like, "No, dude, I'm going to tell you what to do." Like, really, a lot of very nuanced stuff with Fagin. A lot of nuanced, like, people having influence and power over the other people. Like we're all at the lower end of the status, of the social stratosphere. But then within that, there's other levels. There's Fagin and Bill, and then Nancy, and then the kids. And it's interesting how Fagin plays kind of both sides. At certain times, he's very dominant and he kind of yells at the kids and whips them into shape. And then other times he's just very charming and very kind of almost like mesmerizing, like, I don't know. It seems like the type of guy you would want to trust. Like,
well,
he makes it.
He gives that aura to like the kids need to trust him. He needs them to trust him. So he's very charming and charismatic. But we see towards the end when Dodger steps out and has that wallet and says like, "Here you go. Like we can keep doing this." He grabs it and Dodger like tries to reach for it again, and he immediately puts it behind his back and is like, "Well, I've got the power over you now. So like, you're gonna listen to me again." And it's like his dynamic is always changing. It's always flipping. If he can get ahead, he's going to, and he's going to use that against you because you gave him the leg to do it, or you gave him the step to do it.
Yeah, and he has a fascinating song toward the end of the movie where he kind of thinks about getting out and decides not to. One of the things for me that always make like is the sign of a good musical is that like you still get new good songs after the intermission, where a lot of times it's like good stuff, like it's like the heavy hitters right away, and then a lot of like reprises. Or songs that don't quite fit, usually because the story gets more serious and it's harder to sing about like serious, scary stuff, which is part of why Bill never sings. But we get the big song where Oliver's Who Will Buy, where Oliver's introduced to like the wealthier side of town and kind of the good life. And then Fagin's song about maybe getting out of there. And then they do a really good job of, I think Oompa Pa's a really good song where Nancy's kind of using every ounce of influence and minimal power that she has over just this one like cat house, basically. This tavern cat house
cross section of
and she's influential here. And it's fascinating that again, where the movie kind of does this like fun, like jovial bar song like
Mhm.
sing-along thing at the same time where the story's getting darker and darker and darker.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
part of that is just because that's the way these people process things.
Mhm.
Because like with
What
It's
else
a
can you
Fine
do?
Life, it goes right back to that. Where like they're singing about like we don't have anything really, but we got a decent outlook and we've got this place and we've got each other, and that's good enough for me.
Mhm.
Although we know that's a little bit of a lie just by the way that they act
Yeah,
over the
definitely convincing
entirety
themselves that
of the story.
that's
Right.
all right.
But then they just kind of do it again because it's the only thing that they really know how to do. And it's the only way that Nancy can actually like summon up any ounce of influence on anything.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, no, really, really well done. The more I think about it, just kind of the constant juxtaposition of cheeriness and optimism and hope with the surroundings, which is for the most part, except for the one glaring when it's flipped, but for the most part, dirty, grimy, the really just hard Scrabble life in England, just trying to survive in London, and then juxtaposing that with really great dance moves and cheery singing and like choruses and like you mentioned, Adam, the thing they did where they all kind of turn into a train or a carriage and they like
Yeah.
go around the room. Like
Yeah.
there's certain stuff choreography wise that is just
Yes.
so, I mean, just perfect and definitely like an homage to like older Hollywood, but like it still felt, I don't know, not the same as that type of stuff, like a cut above. I don't know. I just think that the production value was just, it's really impressive. Like you said, Adam, to be reminded what can be achieved before any sort of graphics existed. Literally just timing and practice and
Yeah.
timing and practice. Like it's incredible.
Well, and that's something also I failed to mention earlier is I really liked, obviously we all sat down and watched this together. I really liked some of the commentary that was provided, not only in like the banter that we had watching this together, but like Nate provided like that first song. I think it was the first song, or is that
Consider Yourself.
Consider Yourself
probably.
took 3 weeks to film. Like that is, you appreciate some of the artistry of it a lot more. That like we got the choreography wrong in this part, or somebody was moving wrong in that part, or
There's so many
couldn't get the
people in
lyrics
the
right,
shot
or
all the time, and so many moving parts.
you gotta have like, just like when you watch a play on Broadway or in your local theater, everyone's got to be on, or you can see something that's off and you go, ooh, that's not right, or that's not right, and it ruins the entire picture of what you're doing, and everything is like spot on here.
Right after you told us that, Nate, there was a scene where they're Dodger and Oliver are walking down the street like towards the camera, and there's a bunch of people behind them and a bunch of stuff happening, and they're coming towards the camera. And then one of the last things that happened is like people come in from the side with these huge barrels, and it's almost like Donkey Kong style, and they have to like weave their way between them like with the music. And like just watching them do that, like when they were weaving to dodge the barrels, I was like, oh my god, like they really like. They got to dodge those barrels. It's not like, I tripped. Another take. It's like, oh my God, you just fucked up. And like everybody back to their places. Like we're taking lunch. Like good
they did
Lord.
the same thing.
The
they did the same thing.
The pressure of those kids to be just like, oh yeah, and then we're gonna at the very end we're gonna roll barrels at you and you got to dodge them. Like
I think it's the beginning of that number.
Make it look good.
There's a set of like, I don't know, 6 or 8 people that come like dancing into the screen, and they have to dance between them to get through to their place at the back so that other stuff can come in. And you see them like tiptoe and make sure they don't trip over anybody or they don't trip the performers because they're right in front now. And like, there's a lot of that. You have to just hit your mark and you got to go. Like, that's what's so impressive about like live theater. And they were able to take that and make it impressive in film. And that's always fun to see that artistry. Well, that's what makes theater fun. It's at least in my mind.
Sure. And that's part of what makes this movie so rewatchable for me, outside of just the phenomenal music. Anytime you get a movie where you like a musical like this, like the Disney ones we grew up with, where you like the music, it like the rewatch value just goes through the roof.
Yep.
Because you like to relive those moments. And for me, there are like 10 songs in this movie that I love. Plus Fagen's performance, and Dylan, you mentioned the characters and like just the choreography and the sets and all of it. I just love living in this world and like the ups and downs and how big this story feels for people who are viewed as like having such small, insignificant lives.
Small urchins.
Yeah.
On the street. Like, absolutely.
Yeah, I can definitely see the rewatch value being very high for this to catch all the details. Like you mentioned, when you love the songs, then you can then the second time you see it, the third time you see it, you can kind of watch, like you notice little things like during the verses that you maybe didn't catch the first time because you were paying attention to this or that or other thing. You know, little flares that are just like, oh man, like I remember the song that Fagin sings about whether he should leave or not. There's one point where like he's kind of debating like, you know, there's less danger if I like go straight or whatever, and he kind of looks back and there's like rope that's hanging and it's perfectly like the rope around his neck, and he kind of looks and he's kind of just like, oh god, and then he like moves on. It's just like so well done, like little tiny things like that. Like,
well, there was a line that I noticed for the first time in my life watching this yesterday where at the beginning of I'd Do Anything, so Dodger's full character name is the Artful Dodger. And when Nancy and Dodger are getting in the carriage at the beginning of that song, she calls him either Artful or Mr. Artful or something, just like as a first name.
Yeah.
Kind of, which I had never noticed before because the song's kind of already going on and it's not like an official lyric.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was always kind of looking and paying at other things and paying attention to other things, but I picked that up this time. So I thought that was really fun. Yeah, I just think this is endlessly rewatchable. It is on HBO Max right now, if anybody wants to check it out. I know Dylan, your friend, the esteemed musical lover and movie critic, we meant to watch this with her. The timing didn't work out right. I still think she would love it. I think you now agree. And it is out there.
There's a local, very high-end art film society that you know, she is a part of, and I will be introducing this, bringing that to the group.
A debutante of sorts.
Yes, and I think it will be very well received. And the last thing I'm going to say about Oliver is, again, you know, if musicals really aren't your thing, and you're also maybe just a little apprehensive about like the 2.5 hours, I think it's fair to say, like, at least for me, it was a little slow at the beginning. Like, basically, like, you need to get to the point where he arrives in London.
Yes.
Yeah. And just
give it through that.
You have to get through that. And there's a 6-minute overture at the beginning. You can skip that.
You don't need it.
It's just music, you guys. but yeah,
music and credits.
If you're listening to this, like, trust the process. Like, at least get to the London and then see how you like it.
That's always what I tell people.
Yourself.
Yeah.
Is like the opener's great, and then it gets a little Once they get to London, that's when that 5-song stretch starts, and it's just
you meet Dodger right away.
It just keeps moving. Nothing feels that long at that point. You already feel like you're through the slowest part of the movie, and if that was a half an hour, you got 2 hours left. It doesn't feel like a 2-hour movie at that point, right? It's just like keeps going. So, agreed. Yeah, it's 4.5 out of me, 4.5 out of Nate, 4 out of Dylan. I think that's quite the stamp of approval.
Indeed.
A very successful movie club choice. I'm gonna give myself a little pat on the back.
Yep. Congratulations for winning and for making a good choice.
Yes. Thank you, Adam.
Yes. Is it? I believe it is your turn to put a wrap on the show.
It is my turn to put a wrap on the show. If I can find,
and he will do that as soon as
the quote that I had, which I think I have since deleted. So give me a moment. I have found it.
Oh, never mind.
All right. I got it. If you guys are, Adam, if you're ready to go.
Take it away.
Hand it over, you avaricious old skeleton.